There's few things in life that are better than a cold, crisp, homebrewed lager in the summer heat. But fermenting beer while temps are skyrocketing and breaking records is no easy feat. Fermentation temperature has one of the biggest impacts on how your beers turn out, and fermentations that are too warm will lead to all kinds of issues like stress yeast, increased off flavors, and just an overall horrible tasting final product. This is especially true for lagers that tend to prefer cooler temps for the cleanest tasting end result. But have no fear, today I have 6 different ways for you to keep cool and still brew a fantastic crispy boy. Plus I'll use these techniques to brew a delicious French dry hop Pilsner that I've been absolutely loving this summer.
From super inexpensive options to the ultimate chilling method to make sure you never have to worry about the temps outside again.
Let's start very simple. This option is what I'm calling the I have no way to chill, but I still want to brew method, aka time to use some heat tolerant yeast. Most lager yeasts like to ferment anywhere from around 45 to 55 degrees Fahrenheit, and most ales like to ferment around 65 to 72 degrees Fahrenheit, both of which are probably way below the temperatures you might be dealing with. That's where Quake comes in, which is a Norwegian ale yeast that can handle much warmer temps and still create a beer that is clean tasting with minimal off flavors. Depending on which strain of Quake you use, some can even ferment cleanly up to 108 degrees Fahrenheit. Now I'm not going to sit here and tell you that fermenting at 108 is going to give you an amazing beer, but it'll work fairly well. And if this is your only option, it can work. And although it's an ale yeast, there are a ton of folks that use it to make pseudo lagers. The key is just to give it plenty of time to cold condition to clear up. A step up from using just Quake is using pressure fermentation. When you ferment under pressure, usually about 12 psi, but no more than 15 psi, you can suppress many off flavors created by hot fermentations. Usually this is specifically in reference to esters, or fruit-like off flavors that can taste like pear, banana, bubblegum, and other weird things that you might not want. But pressure fermentation doesn't necessarily reduce other off flavors, like sulfur for example, so it's not a perfect solution. But if you want to try pressure fermenting, you'll need a fermenter that can hold pressure. Many companies make these fermenters now. They're usually plastic and round. Here are a few options, although I don't have any experience with these personally, but many other brewtubers love them. My experience has been using corny kegs for pressure fermenting, which if you're already kegging, then you just about have everything to give it a try. Or you can always try to pick one up online. Keep in mind that a corning keg is 5 gallons, so you may need to adjust your batch volume. And lastly, you'll need a spunning valve. This allows you to dial in the exact pressure. You don't want it to go too high or you get other off flavors from the stress yeast, sort of defeating the purpose of it all. I've shown in the past how you can make your own spunning valve with some stuff bought at a big box store, but there are also some inexpensive pre-made options these days, since pressure fermentation was quite trendy recently. But again, this doesn't really cool things down, so let's keep going and get chilling. This first option has been tried and true by homebrewers for over the last 20 plus years, the ice bath. Essentially the idea is you have your fermenter and then you stick that fermenter in a larger bucket or even a bathtub and fill it up with ice and cold water. The colder the water on the outside will help the beer chill down faster, at least enough to keep it in check. The best part about this option is that it's basically free, as long as you have an ice machine that can crank out enough ice for you to keep cool for several days. Really, the first 3 to 5 days of fermentation are the most important, as this is where most of the fermentation happens, and many of the off flavors can come out. But that's also the big con of this. It's going to take a lot of ice. The bigger your ice bath is, the better off you are, as a larger volume of liquid will take longer to change temp. If you're using a small bucket like I used to do, the water in that bucket will warm up faster, meaning you'll need to add more ice or ice packs sooner. Also, this technique only really cools the outside quickly. The inside of the wort might still be warm, so I wouldn't recommend this for lager fermentations unless you're really on top of it. But that's where the next option might be more useful. A step up from that is what I call a pseudo glycol cooler. Glycol coolers, which I'll talk about in a bit, pump cool water through a tube that sits in the fermenter, and that cycle of cool water more directly chills the beer from the middle of the fermenter. In order to make a pseudo glycol setup, you'll need a few things. A cooler or large insulated container to hold ice water, a submersible pump, tubing to connect it all, a temp controller, like an Inkbird or something similar, and a cooling coil. A lot of big fermenter companies sell cooling coils separately, so check out your fermenter brand to see if they sell one for your fermenter. Or a good one for any fermenter is this one by Anvil. They're not a sponsor, but I've used theirs for years and it works great. It fits into this specific bung that they sell that also has a spot for a thermal well for a temp probe. That setup then fits on any fermenter that has a bung hole. I'll leave some links in the description for these items if you're interested. The way that it works is that you connect the tubing to your pump and to the cooling coil, then drop it into an ice bath. Then plug the pump into the temp controller, then attach the temp probe on the controller to your fermenter, or in the thermal well if you have one. The closer you can get to touching a wort, without infecting it of course, the better. Set your desired fermentation temperature on the temp controller, and let it do the work. It'll turn the pump on when it gets too hot and send cool water through the cooling coil, chilling down the fermentation. The only real downside is that it uses a lot of ice. And for a long time, I didn't have an ice machine. So I was constantly buying ice or having to slowly build up ice stores with my tiny ice cube trays. Eventually I got an ice machine, but even still, it's a pain to keep filling the cooler with ice. And every now and then, you have to empty the cooler of water since it fills up once the ice melts. Also, I can't even tell you how many times I've woken up to a hot fermenter because the ice melted early on in the night and it's just been pumping warm water through the fermenter. Talk about stressed. Me and the yeast. But if you can manage the ice, then this works quite well. But things are only going to get a little easier from here on out. If babysitting your fermentation is not something you care to do, then a fermentation chamber just might be the answer. This method involves putting your fermenter into a fridge or freezer that has its temperature overridden by a temp controller. By plugging your fridge into the temp controller and sticking the temp probe inside, you can set your desired temp and the controller will turn on and off the fridge until it's just right. It's a great hands-off way to solve the fermentation temp issue. The only real issues are finding an affordable fridge or freezer and the space to store it. Again, Craigslist or OfferUp are your friends, but take a tape measure and your fermentation dimensions and be sure it'll fit. Many small fridges have weird bumps in the back for the mechanisms that make them work. If budget isn't a concern for you, many homebrew companies actually make fermentation chambers specifically for our lovely hobby. Kegland, for example, has a nice one that uses some tech to sync their floating hydrometers to, so that you can really dial in the temp control. I personally live in a small apartment, so bringing in a second fridge just to make beer is kinda out of the question. And for many years that left me struggling with the DIY glycol setup. That was until I finally got my hands on the real deal. The contents of this box are about to change the way that I brew beer. Let's open it up. This is the Ice Master Max 2 Glycol Chiller by Brewbuilt, and a huge shout out to this video sponsor More Beer who hooked me up with this beauty. This single machine can do what my little dinky DIY option can times 2, and it's all in this one box. Inside is like a mini fridge, with copper coils that chill the water or glycol mixture down. Glycol is a liquid that you can mix with water, usually about 20% of the total solution, and it allows the chiller to cool down the water below freezing temp, making the chiller work more efficiently. Then there are 2 internal pumps and 2 temp probes that allow you to keep 2 fermentations cool. It's truly as easy as set it and forget it. All you need to do is put the temp probe into your fermenter and then set your desired temp on the front. Then the chiller will work to keep the ice cold water flowing through your cooling coil until it's right where you want it. More Beer also hooked me up with some quick disconnects. And with the help of a few pieces of hardware and some cheap insulation from the big box store, I now have an awesome way to keep beer cool. So again, big thank you to More Beer. And if you're in the market for a glycol chiller or need any brewing supplies, be sure to use the link in the description and I'll get a small affiliate kickback. Thank you to everyone that uses the links in the description. It helps me out a ton. So now that I have my own glycol system, let's test it out and see if I can still make a clean tasting beer on a hot day. This recipe is a French Pilsner inspired by a recent beer I had by Seek Beer Co. in San Diego. It was an Alsatian Dry Hop Pilsner. The Alsace region of France is right on the border of Germany and is home to some great food and farming. Plus, it's the Paris Summer Olympics this year, so it only felt right. For ingredients, I'm sticking to as much French stuff as I can. Ideally, it would be French malts, but all I had was German stuff at my local homebrew shop. 73% German pills and 27% flaked maize. The corn will help lighten the beer up and let those hops really shine. Speaking of which, I'm using a little bit of Magnum for bittering. Otherwise, this is all Strisselspalt, a French hop and the star of the show. 1.5 ounces are going into the boil, and then a half ounce is going to go in the dry hop on day 3. I'm kind of breezing over the instructions here, so if you want to see the full recipe, check out the description for more details. Anyway, it was fermented with SafLager S23, and then I let it ferment at 50 degrees for a week, which was absolutely no problem for the glycol. I never even had to worry about the temp, as it would just kick on the pump if it traveled beyond my desired range, which you can always program to your liking. The second week, I slowly ramped up the temp to make sure it was fully fermented out, and to give it a diacetyl rest. And then it was time to cold crash. Cold crashing is where you chill down the finished beer to help drop out any sediment or yeast, giving you a clearer beer to keg up. And before this, that was something I was never really able to do prior to kegging. With the pseudo glycol, I felt like it was such a waste of ice. And man, it would have taken a lot of ice. And even then, I'd only be able to get down to about 50 degrees Fahrenheit. But now with this baby, I can set it as low as 30 degrees. and in about a half day or less, it's perfectly chilled and ready to be kegged and carbonated. In fact, while it's cold crashing, I even added CO2 to the fermenter so I can 1, not let my fermenter implode on itself, and 2, get a head start on carbonating, meaning the beer will be ready to drink even faster. Glycol has absolutely changed the way I brew.
All right, I thought I'd take this outside since it's a beautiful day, and why not enjoy this by the pool? But this beer turned out fantastic. I think when you brew super simple recipes, it can seem like it's gonna be easy, but when there's really nothing to hide behind, that's where you can really find the flaws in the beer. And I feel like Pilsners are the ultimate recipe to kind of test your skills as a brewer and test to see if you have fermentation under control. And this beer turned out extremely clean. I taste no off flavors, and it really allows the simplicity of the beer to shine. And in this case, lets the Strisselspalt, which is really the star of the show, shine. And to me, the hops kind of give a slight fruity note, almost berry quality, but it's very herbal and almost has a tea-like quality to it, which is really nice. It makes it super refreshing, easy to drink, and perfect for a summer beer. So if you're looking for a great summer recipe, especially a good Pilsner, try giving an Alsatian Pilsner a try. Really good. So there you have it, 6 different ways to brew and keep cool in the summer. I really wanted to show various options at various prices because we're all on a different stage in our home brewing. So I wanted to include a little bit of something for everybody. Glycol is definitely not the cheapest option, but I think if you're serious about brewing and you have the means, it's definitely worth the investment. But whatever way you do it, I hope that you can keep on brewing and keep enjoying great beer in the summer. So cheers to you, happy brewing. And if you're looking for more great summer recipes, then why not check out some of these? I got a whole playlist full of my favorite lager recipes that I've brewed so far. Cheers and happy brewing.